And let me just say, children, this is something you just have to work with a lot before it starts kind of to become clear. Because just like Ryan with the adding like terms and whatever, you get mixed up with the rules between multiplying and dividing and subtracting and adding. So it just takes a while. If you don't get it right away, you just kind of have to think about the rules. We already talked about adding, right, where you did this. What's the answer to negative 3 plus a negative 2? Remember the rules were if they have the same sign, you know, if you're adding two negative numbers together, you're getting a bigger negative. You're going farther in the hole. I owe somebody $3, I owe $2 more. I add them together, I get, David, negative 5, because I'm getting bigger. If they're opposite sides like this, negative 3, I wish my board was working right, plus a positive 2, if they're opposite signs, you are always, and you're adding them together, you are always going to subtract those two numbers. Okay? Because you have 3 negatives, you have 2 positives, you need to know the difference between the negatives and the positives. There is one more negative than there's positive, so you end up with a negative 1. Okay? Those are really the only things you have to remember. Now, here's the deal with subtracting, children. Take this for what it's worth. Let's say I have a negative 3 minus a negative 3 and a negative negative 3 minus a negative 3 and negative 3 plus, I'm sorry, I'm doing minus a positive 3. Okay. This is the only thing you have to understand, children. In math, there is no such thing as subtracting. There's just adding its opposite. And that's the rule you're going to write down here. To subtract, comma, you just add the opposite. Write that, and then I'll show you this very early. If you get used to it, it's not bad. It might not seem real clear right now. So that's this. Instead of subtracting a negative 3, I am going to add the opposite of negative 3, which is positive 3. So instead of subtracting, I add the opposite. And then a negative 3 plus a positive 3 gives me 0. Okay. Instead of subtracting, I add the opposite. So negative 3, what was negative 3 minus a positive 3 is now negative 3 plus a negative 3. What is a negative 3 plus a negative 3? Adding two negatives together gives you a bigger negative. Andrew, it's negative 6. Okay. The way if you want to think about it logically, let's go back to this one. What was this? This was negative 3 minus what? A positive 3 minus 3, negative 3 minus a negative 3. What you think about with this is, if you think in terms of money, you owe somebody money and you took away a debt of negative 3. I mean, that's kind of what you when you subtract a negative, you're actually adding when you subtract a negative because you're taking away a debt. Caleb owes me $10. I take away his debt of $10. That meant I had to give him $10 for him to do that. Okay. So you just have to think, when you're subtracting integers, you flip it, make it a plus, and flip the sign of the next number there. That's a pretty simple little process there. By the way, don't let this confuse you here. 6 minus 5. Hopefully you know what 6 minus 5 is. Okay. This doesn't throw the regular rules of subtraction. Okay, but the book just writes it like this to get you used to this. This would be the same thing as this. A positive 6 minus a positive 5. If you use the complicated rules I give you, that changes this to a plus and changes this to a minus. What is a positive 6 plus a negative 5? 1. You don't have to think about it that way, but that's kind of the gist of that there. Let me throw a bunch at you here. I should maybe use different colors.
Yes.
Wouldn't that help? Okay, well, I'll give you a chance. You try these as I write them up here, and we'll talk about it. Negative 12 minus negative 3, negative 3 minus negative 12, negative 12 minus positive 3, and negative 3 minus positive 12. So you are just now thinking this. To subtract, I'm just going to add their opposites. This makes this a plus, and this a plus. That makes this a plus, and this a plus. That makes this a plus, and this a minus. That makes this a plus, and this a minus. And then you do it just like addition. Negative 12 plus a positive 3. They're opposites, so it is, David?
Negative 9.
Negative 9. Negative 3 plus a positive 12. Again, they're opposites, so subtract, and it ends up, Logan, on positive 9. Negative 12 plus a negative 3. If they're the same sign, you add them together and you take that sign. It would be, Maggie Dervis? Negative 12 plus a negative 3. What's that? If they're the same sign, you add them together. 3 and 12 is 15, and it's a negative because that's what sign it is. You're going farther in the hole, negative 12 more. And this one here turned into negative 3 plus a negative 12. Again, they're the same sign. What happens when they're the same sign? You put them together, add them together. It's 15, and they're both negative, so it's a negative 15. Perfect. Now, because we can't do enough of these, children,